Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video, I will be doing something a bit different. I will be just telling a story, the same as it was told to me in the first person. A creepy, untold ghost story about a child and a simple childhood nursery rhyme. A bouncy night with Lizzie Borden. When I was just a young boy, about 6 or 7, my family and I was really into taking road trips around the state of Colorado. One day, on the way home from one of those trips, we were all sharing ghost stories. I don't recall how we got on the topic. I'm pretty sure it started by us boys talking about Bloody Mary, a popular ghost story rhyme at our school at the time. Well, my stepfather, being the person he was, always sharing more information than he probably should to just children, began to tell us ghost stories. This included Bloody Mary, we only knew the rhyme, Candyman, this I'll tell another time, and Lizzie Borden. He goes on to tell us that Lizzie was a real person that had a mental breakdown and hacked her family up with an axe. And this is more than just a story. It does have some historical accuracy. And despite her being acquitted, Sullivan allegedly gave a deathbed confession to her sister, stating that she had changed her testimony on the stand in order to protect Borden. This all being noted, I tell you my own story. That night, after the road trip, my brother and I decided to have a sleep out in our backyard on our trampoline. We did this often in the summer nights. We would like to play outside till our little hearts were worn out and then fall asleep on the trampoline. Still on the high from earlier that night, we were still telling ghost stories, and for whatever reason, I decided to continuously chant the rhyme told to us earlier by my stepfather.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Andrew Borden now is dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing. On the cows she will swing.
We chanted and laughed at this rhyme many times that night until we fell asleep outside on that trampoline. So, I might add that the home we lived in at the time was a 100-plus-year-old Victorian that my parents were in the process of restoring. Everything about that house already had its own creepy factor, but my family and I living there for so long didn't really bother us much. We would joke that sometimes the old owner would get mad and push things off counters and such. But back to the main story. There we were, just my older brother and I asleep on the trampoline in the center, surrounded by as many blankets as our parents would allow us to bring outside. But for whatever reason, I woke up stone cold, with my head under the blankets to help keep warm. I could not see anything. My neighborhood at this time of night was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. It was at this point I thought I heard something moving around the trampoline. So naturally, being young and scared shitless after telling ghost stories all night, my anxiety is high. So I bravely began to slowly peek one eye out of the blanket. As soon as I could see the tall, unmowed green grass around the trampoline, I see the shadow of something out there, walking around the trampoline in circles. Terrified, I began to try to wake my brother up, who is dead to the world, and quietly and lightly, sometimes snoring a bit. I poke him in the back and whisper as quietly as possible, "Bro, wake up. Bro, wake up. Bro." No response, so I again peek out the blanket, seeing whatever was circling around the trampoline may have heard me and now is just standing in front of me. All I can see is feet in the grass, barefoot and muddy. I again try to wake my brother in a trembling, whispering voice as quiet as possible. "Bro, someone's out there. Bro, someone's out there." Again, no response. So I quickly peek out again to see if this person has noticed me saying something again. This moment I will never forget. I still have this face burned into my memory, even still, 20 some years later. This time, when I look, I see what is clearly a woman with black, messy hair. Her face and clothes looked like she had just climbed out of a muddy, wet hole, with no light in her eyes, black as night. This terrified me so much, I sprung out of the blankets and off the trampoline, jumping as far off it as I could, and ran screaming inside, crying in terror. I ran into my parents' room crying, and I quote, this is what I said: "Lizzie's trying to get me." They awoke in shambles. My brother comes up shortly after, wondering what has happened, and my mom responds, "Oh, hon, that was just a story." She then goes on to chew my stepfather's ass for telling me the story, and takes me to my room and tries to soothe me down to sleep. I finally calm down, and she goes back to bed. I lay there a while, still unable to sleep. Every time I would close my eyes, I would still see that face again. Sometimes I still do to this day. After a while of laying there in my awesome red race car bed, I hear strange laughter from outside my window. To explain a bit better, my room was on the second floor and had two windows. One that faced out to a dead-end street that went to a bike trail behind our house. Another facing outward toward the main road that leads to our house. There was one street light on every corner of the block. So our house had a street light in the front yard, and the window that sat directly in front of my bed looked down at the street and sidewalk in front of my house. That is where I heard this laughter come from. Now, there is a college campus not far from where I live, so it wasn't unusual really to have some college students in the area making a scene. Every once in a while you catch them doing strange things in the middle of the night, because college. So once again my curiosity takes the best of me despite the night I had. I have always been one of the braver ones, and tried to my best to never let my fear control me. So I get up and glance down at the street to see what is going on, and there was Lizzie Borden with her axe glaring back up at me with a terrible smile. I slammed back down into my bed in terror and began to cry. I covered my head with blankets and began to sob myself to sleep. Every so often, hearing that cackling laughter. I have never done a rhyme that has to do with ghosts again in my life. I'm now in my 30s, and this, to this date, was still my most terrifying memory. I won't forget the dread and terror 7-year-old me felt that night. But if one thing is clear, it's the memory of that face looking back at me from underneath the trampoline that night. That will stick with me forever. Hey, do you have a scary story? Well, I'd certainly like to hear it, and a place you can share it with me is through my Patreon. Not only would you be supporting this channel, but it would put you in direct contact with me to to hear your story and potentially help you share it. Thank you, Atone, for reading the lullaby. Link will be in description. I found her on Fiverr. And as always, thanks for watching. Hey, I recently found a really creepy haunted place I have never heard about in the state I live in, not far from where I live. So naturally, I really dug into researching this place. But I want more sacrifices. Subscribers before I share my research. So be sure to slide over to the subscribe button for me. And once I get 500 subscribers, I promise I'll share my research.